Well, hello. Thanks for coming to my talk. This is an exciting fisheye view of a large hall, which will be thrilling. Well, as my talk says, I'm going to go over platform engineering for private cloud, one of the more thrilling titles I've ever used in that presentation. And what I want to cover, as it would, say, is not only looking at platform engineering itself, but some of the things that's different when you apply it on your dedicated environment, your own infrastructure. Now, what exactly private cloud is fluid, but I generally think of it as primarily if you're running it, you could say on premises, your own infrastructure. And to some extent, it could also be if you're treating, let's say, cloud infrastructure as just kind of, this sounds pejorative, but let's call it dumb infrastructure, something that you build your own stack on top of and run your own thing instead of using something that is very close to developers. And I think, it's very popular nowadays. And there's an evolution from all of these things. And what's interesting about it, what's great about it being in the line of work that I'm in, is there really is this continuous evolution we have of trying to finally crack making infrastructure easier for developers to use, thinking about how we make it not only easier for them to deal with infrastructure directly, or as we like to say, write more code and think about their application more. And hopefully this time it'll stick. This is definitely the most characters we've used since IT service management in the 2000s to describe this endeavor. So maybe instead of shortening it like we've done in past ones, once we finally have a long descriptive word, it'll hold. But we'll see. We like to go in cycles for things. So why private cloud? Well, I think when I've been interested over my career in where workloads are, kind of what the movement towards various types of infrastructure, whether it's private cloud or public cloud are. And so it's good to check in every now and then, maybe, I don't know, depending on how feisty you're feeling, every year or every 2 years, and ask the question, not so much what kind of excitement and revenue is around the various places, mostly public cloud that you could move, but where are the workloads? Where are the applications? And this is pretty important for platform engineering because probably, unless you figured out some strange exotic use case, if you don't have applications, all the platform engineering you're going to do is not really important or worth anything, right? The point of platform engineering is to support applications that you're running. Sure, you want to have things that are secure. It should be performant. You probably want some database services. I always think it's important to remind ourselves of the number one requirement: it should work. But those are things that any sort of engineering or approach could give you or would purport to. But starting off with understanding where these applications are running that you'll be supporting, or if you prefer a very old term, workloads, which I might slip into doing, I think is important. So I'm going to spend the first time talking about that location of workloads because I don't think it's really discussed very much. And the implications, what you need to do for platform engineering to be successful and useful, aren't always based on or directly tied to this place that they're running. It's kind of if you remember, it's kind of a medium is the message or the medium is the infrastructure. I'm going to work on that phrase a little bit more because that didn't work out so well. So this is just a brief introduction to myself. I've been lucky to work at Pivotal, and then that was VMware, and now it's the Tanzu division by Broadcom, as I recall, for 10 years. And in that role, I've spent most of my time talking with large organizations about how they get better at software, their custom-written software. And I've gotten to write several little books. Before that, I was a software developer. I worked on cloud M&A at Dell. You remember when OpenStack was a big deal and everyone was going to build a public cloud out of OpenStack? There's fun stories there. And I've been an analyst at a place called Redmonk for a while, and then 451 Research. Anyhow, and I was a programmer way before that, long, long ago. I host a couple of podcasts, including one that I forgot to put one up here. But as my friend Andrew Schaefer used to say, engage with my brand. There it is. Now moving on. So let's get into that thing, where are the applications, right? And again, to emphasize this, knowing where these applications are is going to drive some significant ways to how you think about doing platform engineering, what it is. So finding this is surprisingly hard. And there are estimates kind of locked up behind analyst paywalls, one of which I'll show you here. But if you spend a little bit of time looking at the experts on where they say the applications are, you can start to get some idea and get to that number that I had up there, that it's about 50%, maybe it's 40, 60, I don't know. We'll see. So first of all, back in January, I guess we could go to some people who are the best experts at this, the people at Amazon. This is a quote from their, the AWS CEO, and it is scoped, as you can read it, down to large organizations, which is the ones I'm most interested in. And I think the ones where probably platform engineering has probably the widest relevance, and this idea of platform engineering in private cloud certainly has the most relevance. And you can see, I try not to do math in public, but if you do this math here, I think that amounts to 90 to 60% of workloads in large organizations have most of their workloads, or a lot of their workloads, on private cloud, right? Or whatever you want to call it, dedicated infrastructure on premises. They're running it with outsourced to managed service providers, but it's not cloudy infrastructure. And so that starts to give you an idea with a crazy big range. Of course, this is across, it's not an average, it's just various customers, of the amount of applications that are there. Now, here's another, this is something that if you read IDC, like I do. Being a former analyst, I have maybe a different relationship with analysts. I think their work is pretty good. And if you read them year over year, you get a sense of the momentum and the way they're doing things, and who you can trust, like who's making up surveys and who not. And I think IDC is quite reliable here. And this is some recent findings from their Cloud Pulse report, a survey that they do about every year, with survey and estimates, a report, if you will. Unfortunately, they get very upset if you use their data from 18 months or older. I'm not sure what that says about its validity 18 months ago, but if you can trust me, remember I wrote all those books and I have a smiling face, do podcasts, so I'm trustworthy. What you would see is that these numbers more or less have been creeping around the same level for about 10 years or so. I don't know, maybe 8 years. I lose track of time as I get older. But here, and this is why I keep saying dedicated environment, they're very prickly about not saying private cloud, it's dedicated environment, which, sure, sounds great. But if you add these up, you see that it's just under 15% of dedicated environment, although they slip into dedicated cloud down there, so maybe we should send them a note about things. But you get this sense that it's around half and half, around 40-60, something like that. Now, there's all sorts of other figures, depending on what kind of charts you like. There's some from Barclays and Goldman Sachs that are particularly good if you really want to get deep into looking at where these applications are. But when you look over all of them, as I keep saying, you kind of arrive, or at least I arrive, at this conclusion. And especially, as the AWS Matt was saying, when you look at larger organizations, this holds a whole lot more. Now, thankfully, I have a philosophy degree, so I'm very comfortable with ambiguity and just kind of like approximations. So these numbers make me happy. I don't really need much more precision than that to figure out that that's kind of the area that we're working in there, right? So the point being, there is a significant amount of applications running on premises, running on private cloud, running in a dedicated environment, right? And what this starts to mean is that there is, let's say, organizational ownership and responsibility of the stack in both good and bad ways. And so when you come in and you want to build a platform, again, a platform being to support applications, to support developers, we'll get into what that entails as far as different things that team or those teams need to do than if they were just kind of supporting a full stack that they didn't necessarily own and have responsibility for. So with that, let's define what a platform is. It's always good when you're talking about something to define it yourself so you can say, well, that's not my definition of something, when you're objecting to it. So here, I will do that. So first of all, if you haven't been following platforms and platform as a product for a while, There's a great talk that was just was given and then published by Paula Kennedy here, who I used to work with. And you can see that the timeline of platforms is quite long, right? If you want to do something like throw in platform as a service, if you remember that term, with places like Heroku and others, like way back when, it kind of goes back further. But this is actually a really delightful overview of the idea of what a platform is. And you can see the long timeline that it's gone through. And a lot of funny, subtle jokes about how we keep repeating ourselves over and over again from Paula there. So I realize you can't click on that now, but perhaps later. Maybe there's some talks you're not interested in. You get worn out. You want to enjoy a croissant or a hearty sandwich. It's a good 25 minutes to spend if you're really into platforms. So any talk on platform engineering is required to begin by quoting Evan's 2018 definition of a platform, which I have here, so I'll move on. Now, recently, in the past 3 or so years, I think there was a resurgence in and kind of a creation of the category of platform engineering. Arguably, the good folks at Humanitech kind of kicked this off when they were taking their internal developer portal and they wanted to do some market category creation, which is great. You want to create a market category that perfectly fits the thing that you have to sell. And if you remember, they declared that DevOps was dead, and that kicked off 2 years of fantastic conversation. But I think we've kind of arrived at this notion, as I was joking with that Dune picture at the beginning, that platform engineering is what we call all of this stuff, how infrastructure people, operations people are trying to support developers as much as possible. Now, there was, like I said, I lose track of time. So let's say about 2.5 years ago, the first thing that emerged was that the P in internal developer platform actually stood for portal, if you remember that. And this was when Spotify open source Backstage. It was like this great portal, if you will, internal for developers, hence an IDP. And there was a lot of interest in it, there still is, and a lot of kind of thinking about it as the kind of, this is going to be not quite accurate, but the UI for Kubernetes, if you will. The UI for a stack that you have mixed in with the project management that goes with team, making, to use a fancy term people like, making what various teams are doing inside a company legible, kind of knowable, making it a lot more standardized. And that was kind of dragged in, and that's also what Humanitech did. It dragged in this notion of a platform. Now, very quickly, as happens often, the analysts swooped in, did some great diagrams, and you can see that what happened is the notion of a platform expanded to be more of the infrastructure, going further down than just that portal on top. And then a memo was sent out to all of us in the platform world that the P now changed to platform from portal. Portal is just a part of what a platform is, right? Now, here are two diagrams of what a platform is. The one on your right, of course, is the best platform you will ever encounter. You should definitely be using it and insisting that you have it because I work there and I like to pay my bills and profit from that. Thank you for sending me here, Tanzu Division by Broadcom. Now, if you're not into vendor pitches and you want a vendor-neutral way of thinking about the world, which is always great, the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, has a great reference architecture that they came out with a number of years now. And what you see in that architecture, there's two important things. I mean, I guess bridging to the portal part, you can see that the portal is just one part of what that big old, whether you think of it as a cake or a very complex, tasty burger, depending on how hungry you are and what you like to eat, you can see that the portal is just part of it. But as you look through all of those things, maybe it's not too insightful or revelatory, but what you see is the components in there are all oriented around what people who have hair color getting slightly lighter and whiter as me would call middleware. Maybe that's a terrible word. You could call it services, if you like, components, frameworks, whatever word you enjoy using that makes you feel younger and more zesty instead of something like middleware. But you can see you've got databases, event queues. There's some things that are a little subtle to see in there, how you package and deploy your applications. We used to call it a release train, I think. Then it was a secure software supply chain. All sorts of phrases and words if you like these things. But there's also a little chunk of infrastructure-y stuff, right, that's included in there as well. And I think the theory of this, well, I guess it's the practice of this, is the more sort of embedded you have all of these things, the more you can integrate all these things, the easier it becomes for developers because the more automated and standardized you can make them, and therefore the more self-service that you have. And hopefully, the less your application developers have to spend time thinking about, like, how do I package up this application? How do I express the dependencies and like a multi-regional deployment of things like that? And especially not having, not wanting them to invent those things. I think the third interesting thing about this to kind of have in your head is that even coming from the home of everyone's favorite Kubernetes, the CNCF Foundation, Kubernetes doesn't really show up here. And that's, at least in this diagram, nothing against Kubernetes, but it's more to say the infrastructure is not really part of the platform, right? That's not the important part of it. Infrastructure is some other thing of it, down there in the purple layer. I always think, I don't like to criticize people's work, but I'm not really into those like Easter color pastel things, like kind of darker colors. But that kind of purple Easter egg there that you have down there, that's where the infrastructure lives. So that's another thing that you want with the platform is more or less infrastructure agnosticism. Now, is that perfectly possible all the time? We sure would like it to be every 5 or 10 years. To bring back another phrase from the history's past, we want multi-cloud and portability. We want to avoid lock-in. And it'd be great to hear anyone who's been consistently successful with that over the past few years. That would be a breakthrough paper. Maybe we can go to IT Revolution Press, put together a working group, and have like a 5-10 page PDF about like, we did it! Multi-cloud, application portability. It only took us 2 days to move to a completely different stack of infrastructure. So what does a platform team do? Well, here is a good, I think, roles and responsibilities division of things. There's a lot more things, but this is a nice summary. And you can see, you've got your application teams, developers, as people would say. You've got your platform teams. And then you also have more that your platform teams do along this spectrum, right? So your developers are there, writing their code, doing the things they're responsible for. They're hooked up to the tools that you have, the pipelines, all of those things. And the sense you should get from what the platform team is doing is they are, to put it one way, they're curating and developing the services that are in a platform. They're making sure that it's integrated together. They're taking care of all those thrilling meetings with networking and security people and auditors, right? They're doing a lot of the work to say this platform not only makes the application developers work easier. I don't know about their lives, because you might, every time you're more efficient. This is a fun thing about AI, is you should be asking, I'd love to use AI, and if I'm like 25% more productive, does that mean I can go home early and maybe work 4 days a week? Because really, if you're more productive and you don't get anything from it, you're getting kind of a raw deal. So make sure that you pay attention to what your productivity increase is and be like, now I'd like to not do more work, or get compensated for it somehow. Anyhow, where was I? Yes, so what you see these platform teams doing is kind of upward doing that, kind of making it easier for developers. But a lot of the hidden work that they do is making sure that all of the downward-facing things, and there's nothing pejorative about the directions, you could reorient it to, 45-degree angles, or if I knew my nautical terms, port and starboard or something. But you can see that they're doing a lot of the work to fix it into the rest of the organization, right? And there is, I think it's a little unknown. I haven't heard a lot of discussion of this. I think it's a little unknown about who actually does what I would call the management. The monitoring, the troubleshooting, the root cause analysis for things up and down the stack. I think the platform engineering team does a fair amount of that, but at some point, you probably need to open up, some phone call or maybe create some channel, depending on if you're like a Slack, Matter, Google Chats, Teams, whatever person, and talk to your friends, the network engineers and the storage people to kind of troubleshoot what's actually happening. Maybe even the developers. If they care to show up at that time. This might be one of those free times they have because they're 25% more productive, enabling you to be 120% productive when they don't show up. So a logical question, is it how do you say that guy's name, Bettiger's Law or something? Whenever there's a headline with a question, the answer is no. But let me explain why, kind of go into that. Because I think there has been a lot of positioning, if you will, which is to say, thinking of Kubernetes as a developer platform. And I know that because I've paid attention over the past 10 years, and I've also talked to numerous operations and infrastructure teams at large organizations, and we have the same conversation. Just to give you the brief version, they say, these application developers, and then we talk about how great they are, and special snowflakes for a while. Little, gun shooting, having fun there. They asked us to stand up Kubernetes, and we did, and they're not using it, right? And they don't really, we don't see them going to it, and so what are we doing wrong? And I think that is because there's this perception that that's what you would do, right? That it's this complete developer platform that's fully ready to use. But you see this. This is a survey that we did, we used to do annually. And you see that as Kubernetes has spread more and more, right? That's what you see. That's why there's if I can count, 5 years of questions here. As there have been more people using it, you see the benefits of Kubernetes kind of dropping in the survey base, right? And that's what you would expect as a new technology rolls out, right? New people are using it, they're figuring out how to use it in their organization. But the one highlighted here, and to give you a quick little summary, the top green one is the most recent year, which is 2024, and the bottom blue one is the first year. But you see one of the developer-facing metrics, the ability to deliver code faster or shorten software development cycles, has been dropping over those past 5 years. Now, it'd be fun to do a survey this year and see what the result is. But also a little weird is you see that similar kind of movement for a lot of the areas there. Now, again, I think that is largely due to an effect of you have a new technology, you got to figure it out. But I think it's particularly, distressing, disheartening, unfortunate for people who think about Kubernetes as the full application developer solution, if you will, the thing you would put in place for a platform. And indeed, despite some weirdness in the kind of Kubernetes world over the years, I think the sort of original Kubernetes people have been telling us this for a long time. And here's kind of a summary of the quotes from several years ago. Craig here used to work in my organization, or I guess technically I used to work in his organization at VMware when Heptio purchased them. And you can see this almost like, hey, sorry about all that Kubernetes stuff. It really wasn't our intention that you, the developers, and kind of not Google people, not public cloud provider people, would actually be exposed to that. And there's a great 2-part documentary on Kubernetes. And if you go back and watch it, which you should do after that Paula one, I'm going to assign some more homework later, so you might need a new sheet of paper. It's really a phenomenal look into strategy, right? Because you realize that the whole strategy of Kubernetes was basically to slow down Amazon. And I'll let you look into that, but one thing you should notice if you pay attention to these things that's great is they interview everyone in the industry except Amazon. And Amazon is portrayed as a continuous, looming, kind of Darth Vader-y drone shot of one of their buildings, which is the only way they show up, which should tell you a lot about the relationship of Kubernetes originally, the strategy that they were going after. All right, so we know that Kubernetes, or at least I believe, and therefore know, going back to my liberal arts degree, what's the difference between believing and knowing? Effectively, they're more or less the same thing until you stop believing something, I guess, but that's a talk for another time. So how do you run a platform? We know a platform is all that exciting goop on top of the infrastructure, including services that developers might want to use, ways of supporting it, that sort of thing. So what does it look like in private cloud? Well, the first important thing, and why I want that talk by Paula is a great reminder, is this product part of it. Maybe one day we'll change the P to product. Internal developer product, which would be fun. But at this point, you've probably heard a zillion times if you've ever been to a platform engineering thing. But it needs to be emphasized over and over again because I don't think it's actually practiced that much. I mean, this saying that you should treat your platform as a product is kind of like the idea of stand-up in a stand-up meeting where everyone obviously sits down the whole time, right? It's kind of like subverting the spirit that's right there in the wording of it. So why is it important to have product management, to have at least one role that is actually a product manager. They can go get their pragmatic product management certification. Maybe they can just read a stack of books to figure out what it is. But a product manager is what you have when you have a product. And of course, it means something different when you're selling toothpaste and cereal, more or less. But in the IT world, this is something where, having worked mostly in the vendor world for lots of my career, you get very familiar with the product manager, and application developers generally know this idea. But the important thing, other than selecting the features that you have, kind of guiding what this product looks like, is something even further up the concept chain of a product manager, is in order to have a product, it's great to have customers, right? If you don't have customers as a product, this is kind of the equivalent of having a platform without applications. And so then it's good to ask, who are our customers, right? And as you can imagine, as Thomas here said a couple of years ago, if you are running a platform, you're the product manager for the platform, you think about the developers as your customers, right? These are the first people in line, hopefully they're people, who are getting your thinking, who you're doing things for. Sure, the platform needs to run, that would be cool. It needs to be secure, you got to have all that stuff, but that's like, saying that it would be cool if Earth was hospitable, right? Like, those are basics that you need to have. But the product manager is constantly going through and understanding what the developers are doing, what they do great, what they like, what they dislike, and thinking about how can we change this feature, how can we make it better, how can we add new services to it that would make our customers happier, that would keep them using our product, right? So now, I think probably, and if you're kind of more of a developer, you obviously have a notion of how your day-to-day work could be happier. I remember when I was an application developer, we could up our productivity by stopping complaining all the time because it was a huge amount of the work, so to speak, that we did. But what I advise to people who have more of an infrastructure background, and then maybe even if you're kind of from a developer standpoint going down the stack, is it's good to start asking the developers what they need. And the way that you do that is either you talk with them directly, which is fantastic if you can do that. A lot of these product managers, especially at large organizations, will travel around. You can imagine at large organizations, they have a campus, a hub, whatever you want to call it, various geographic locations, and going around and talking with them, even sitting with them as they do their work, is very valuable. But you can also do things like, to use a word everyone loves, survey them, ask them questions. So what questions should you be asking them? Well, here's a set that you can use. There's a white paper I worked on with a couple of people who do this kind of platform stuff that, again, you can't click on now, but it kind of goes over the theory behind this and some of these questions. And, it's something you can start with. You can use whatever survey thing you have, put it on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, and then the first time you do it, you can crudely, not crudely as in impolitely, but just basics of it, stick it in an Excel spreadsheet, and if you know the magic of sort by ascending, you can start to get an idea of what the most important problems are. Now, that initial thing of going through it, to give you some product management thinking, is great, but what's even better is when you survey them again in 3 months or 6 months, you want to see if things have improved, right? Have some of those high priority things moved down? Are people happier about things? And if not, that's feedback that you need to improve the things that you already shipped, right? That things could be better. Again, thinking about developers as customers, you're interested in them being happier, I guess. And there's some other metrics that you can be interested in about like shipping time and stuff like that. But you're constantly is the wrong word because people don't like to take a lot of surveys. Although I often say, again, going back to the 80% true joke, like if you were to offer developers, would you like to take a survey? Or if you said, hey, would you like to tell me everything that I'm doing that you think is wrong? They probably would be happy to talk about the second thing. I don't know, maybe developers have gotten to be more optimistic and happy since I did it way back when, but probably not. Anyhow, figure out some way of getting feedback from your customers, not just initially, but ongoing, and thinking about how do we use that to guide what's in the platform to product management, just like any product manager would, just like anyone who has a product that they want to, if you will, sell, or drive usage amongst their customer base. Now, this next one, I think, is something that's especially important in private cloud, in large organizations, and that is marketing. A term that I'm very comfortable with because I've, in my sort of developer relations and whatever role, I've worked in marketing over the years. But if that phrase makes you want to, not be happy, just kind of ease into it. You can also call it community management, if you like that better. But what you're doing with this internal marketing, so think about you stand up a platform in a large organization, or you already have one. You're already probably competing with, 3, 4, depending on how big you are, 10 different platforms, plus any developer teams you have who are just like, I don't know why I need a platform. That sounds like a weekend's worth of work. Also, that DHH guy said that you can just do it, so no problem, right? Building your own platform. Now, why they're going to work on the weekends, maybe that's what they do with their 25% improvement. I'm not sure, but it seems like you should not do that. Maybe you should say I could spend a week doing it instead of a weekend. Anyhow, you're competing with a lot of other platforms. Again, thinking about your platform as a product, you're in a market, if you will, a ecosystem, if you don't like that word. And what that means is you need to talk about why your platform is good. You can go through, there's some standard marketing stuff. You want to get your positioning, your messaging, your value propositions, or as us marketing people like to say, value props. Who can be bothered to say 2 words? But part of that is not only narrowing down what your pitch is, or if you prefer, having really good documentation, going over what it is, but also thinking about core community management or marketing things like branding, right? And I see this over and over again in all sorts of large organizations, is one of the first things they do is they come up with a t-shirt, as my friend Deshaun would joke, right? And when you come up with a t-shirt, 1, you've proven that you can get budget, which is thrilling, but 2, you come up with a snappy phrase, a logo, a color scheme, an identity, right? And think about, as developers, we're like, I'm immune to marketing, doesn't work on me, and I love using my Apple Mac. I will defend to the death the type of code editor that I use. I can tell you why the shell I use is extremely important and you're wrong, so forth and so on. Obviously, we're affected by identity and marketing and brand, and sure, it's more about the functionality, not the actual identity that you have. But the same is true for any technology and any platform. So you're trying to define the type of person that someone is or becomes or can be, the identity, by thinking about what your marketing is. And again, you see this across the board with companies, right? Like, I think a great example of that is, I think they still do this, but the U.S. Air Force there, they launched this platform and this whole initiative to get better at software, and they called it Kessel Run, because of course they're going to make a reference to like Han Solo and Star Wars, things like that. And that idea of like, we're kind of like, renegade's not a word you would like your military to use, but we're doing things differently. We're a little more savvy, and we're going to identify to this thing that probably a lot of people involved really like as well. And then we can also make this t-shirt that has a kind of like a double meaning. There's other things that AF could stand for instead of Air Force, if you remember those days, right? But this kind of brand, this kind of internal marketing helps bring that in a great degree. And now, I joked about calling marketing community management, but not that I was being totally ingenuine, but genuine community management is also a huge part of what the platform engineering team does, right? So setting up internal chat channels, having quarterly internal conferences where you bring application teams that have used your platform to talk with other developers, which, by the way, it's a great marketing technique called customer references or word of marketing, having people tell you they were successful with your product, your platform, in more of a peer-to-peer basis than having someone that has no idea what they're talking about saying that it's great, the platform engineers being those people versus the application developers. I have this really distressing, rivalrous idea about application developers. I should probably go revisit that at some point. But you can see that having this, what I would call developer relations effort, starts to become important for a platform team in a large organization in a private cloud environment. And indeed, if you look at large organizations like JP Morgan Chase, big, gigantic global bank, last I checked, they have a team of about 7 or 8 people internally that are developer advocates for the kind of handful of platforms that they have. And they do all of these activities. They go around, it's not only training, it's not only awareness building, but it also becomes a channel. This is the part about developer relations that all DevRel people aspire to. Very few of them get the chance to do it, but it's also a feedback channel going back to that product management, right? So if your internal community people are out there talking with your customers, your developers, they can bring that feedback back to what the product manager of the platform is doing, right? They can start to give some advice on how to prioritize features. So now, I think maybe this is perhaps the most important thing that is different about platform engineering in private cloud in large organizations, and that is, let's call it continuous financial metrics. And so the way that finance, which is to say oxygen, works in an organization, and particularly large organizations, is you're on, let's say, a 12 or 18-month budgeting cycle, right? It's supposed to be 12 months annual, but essentially every year you have to go through an excruciatingly delightful process of saying, this is the budget that we need, proven by the return on investment that we had last year and our projected return on investment in years forward, right? You're basically saying like, well, the reason we need $5 to $10 million is because we're awesome. And they're like, yes, I'm sure you're awesome, but I'm going to need some spreadsheets. And so what this can amount to is metrics, essentially, right? And these metrics are associated with some aspect of helping the business out, right? Like, unless you're working at a tech company, which is great if you are, that metric is usually not oriented around like raw growth, because we're looking for a large startup valuation and then an exit, and then actually making money is someone else's problem, right? Like, that's not necessarily how you kind of budget out these metrics. So you need to start thinking about how are we, from day one, not only tracking what these metrics are, but very, I think, tactically wisely, saying what the metrics are, framing them. Because in my experience, knowing the value of IT, if you will, is extremely difficult unless you're in something that's very close to the business's business, transactions like retail or other things, where you can directly connect, you know, a line of code changing to like people booking more airplane flights or something like that, right? But things get a little more obscure. I like to go back to banking, like what's the return on investment of me being able to see the balance in my bank account? It's theoretically infinite, because if I couldn't, I wouldn't bank there, but you can't really put infinity in a spreadsheet, right? Like that doesn't really work necessarily. So you need to start coming up with metrics that map to why the platform is valuable, right? That allow you to talk upward to your organization. Again, I don't mean to be pejorative, but to talk in terms of finance and business and that planning. And there's all sorts of metrics you can come up with. Again, here's a, kind of like with those survey questions, here's a default set that's been evolved over, I don't know, the past 5-8 years or so. And, you know, it's even formatted in a dense way that I think people in large organizations can do. Have you ever noticed that very good at reading documents in landscape, right? Like that's kind of the mindset you have with the rest of the organization. Is just like, you want to print something, go up to that little thing, you really want to print it in portrait because you've read about the Amazon memos, all the people complaining about how documenting something is better. Just select landscape, you're good to go, right? And things will be fine. So you can see a lot of these things, they are capturing what a platform is trying to do, right? Everyone wants to speed up. Now, speed can be gratuitous, but the point is that the faster your organization, I'll just say business, but you can imagine how this maps to a nonprofit-oriented organization, whether you're helping citizens or otherwise, you can see that the faster you can change your software and get that software in front of users, the faster, if you will, the more that business can evolve, right? So speed is an interesting indication of something. And I don't know, I guess I could reference DORA reports, the DevOps one, not the European banking one, to show that that was important as well. And then, you know, a lot of the rest of these are based on that kind of table stakes that I was going over. But it's also important to emphasize and track to the rest of the organization why the table stakes are good and why the investment in your platform is paying off and representing that in some way, right? Like, again, a lot of these middle ones are kind of like, I think of them as indoor plumbing, right? Like, the value that we put on indoor plumbing is basically zero until it stops working. And then it has infinite value, right? Like we really enjoy it when it turns back on after not being on for a while. And thinking how you represent that so that you don't have to remind people with a catastrophic event is a good number to start tracking. Now, of course, savings is good, and that gets into some weird, like depending on how you think about things, what the situation is. You got to be careful if you're trying to get money. It's good to track savings of how much you could have spent versus how much you are spending, because you don't really want to be in a situation where you're like, and guess what? We need less budget than we had last year. We're saving you money, right? So, but think about how it's more of a good investment. Savings is kind of up there because the other ones are S's. Then you can call those 5 S's. You don't want to be the 4 S's and the I, which would be actually kind of fun. But think about how you represent the money made, the money you're attached to, the kind of savings you have versus theoretic alternatives, and start tracking those things. Now, for developers, kind of inward-facing, there's all sorts of other metrics you can track. Here's kind of like a default set as well. And this is good, again, for people who aren't so concerned about your budgeting, but they're good things to start measuring and tracking. And I think the point with both of these metric things is, again, thinking as your platform as a product needs to have measurements, needs to have metrics. And I know once you start measuring something, that becomes the goal of doing stuff. Hopefully now that you know that, you won't fall into that mistake. I always think that's a weird paradox that people should know that's the issue, and so you need to constantly be thinking about, are we just doing the metrics or not? Good luck. But it's good to have some indicators, some dashboards, if you will, of how things are going and how you can talk to other people through spreadsheets, metaphorically and literally speaking. All right, so just a couple of more things. Thinking about how you spread platform usage through your organization. And again, this is particularly relevant to large organizations, and large organizations use a lot of on-premises or private cloud, so it's particularly relevant to that sphere of things. And this is what I've observed, and many organizations have gone through over the years, is this kind of slow at first spread of a platform, and then having more of a very rapid spread of it. I'm sure there's some math terms I could use there, but see my credentials earlier when it comes to mathematics, or maths, as people like to say. And so what you see is at the beginning of the platform, you see selecting an initial development team, maybe even 2 development teams, and working extremely closely with them, right? They're your first initial customers. And as you're even planning and developing the platform, you want to talk with them to figure out what their needs are and build it around them. Now, you're getting good feedback about stuff. You're also starting small so that your, let's say, your learning function, which is to say, when you fail, that your learning function is as risk managed as possible, right? You don't want to do everything at once. Like if you're thinking of like in the first year, we're going to move 120 to 500 application teams to the new platform, because that's the only way we can make the business case, then you should look around the rest of your organization for alternate jobs that you could have after that doesn't work out. But you see more this slight going sort of rise in development teams on the platform. Now, another side effect that's interesting that goes back to the community management of what you want to do is as you build up these initial teams and as they're successful, they become advocates or customer references for you that you can then use in your efforts to spread the goodness, the great cheer of your platform, right? So you're building up the case in these peers that other developers will probably listen to more than weird infrastructure people who have a strange title. Aren't they basically just DevOps people? People may be thinking, that are more of a trusted source for spreading the idea that a platform is good. And if you're very lucky, you can even take some of those initial people who are interested in helping others. They kind of have that more senior, even kind of like principal engineering mindset of my job is to help the rest of the organization, and start to seed them in other teams, right? So you're taking direct knowledge to new teams of how to use the platform, and so on and so forth, right? But planning out that gradual and then sudden ascent in things becomes very important. And then getting into more of, let's say, planning, right? Planning out the activities that you'll do, what it's going to look like. even getting into budget, what you might even call strategy, if you're not too pedantic about the definition of strategy in a corporate context. There's another great CNCF working group called I think it's the Platform Maturity Model crew. That's not their name. But they've been working on a platform maturity model, which I think is great. They're one of the few people who've managed to cram a maturity model down into, I think, less than 50 pages. I think it's maybe about 25 or 30, and I hear there's a new revision of this coming out. But this is well worth your time reading if you're doing platform engineering or especially planning it in a larger organization, because it's the best version of what a maturity model is. Another word you may not like, but a maturity model is sort of like, here's a bunch of mistakes people in the past have made and how you can avoid them, and what you can expect to happen over the course of things, how you can organize the activities and the stages of what you're doing. It's a lot longer title than maturity model, but maybe it makes you more comfortable. But if you read through this, some of the key things that you'll see are that you can expect it, to have, like, let's say, undeniable success with your platform, which means, let's use the technical term, a lot of applications running on it, right? If you've got like a big platform and there's only a few applications running on it, it's kind of questionable what the overall value of that is. But you can expect it to take more or less 3 or 5 years to go through this entire cycle, to go through these things. Now, there's an important point that all maturity models make, which is maybe you don't need to go through all 5 steps. You might reach step 2 and that's sufficient. But there's all sorts of interesting results from the maturity model, and it kind of, in a good way, is self-enforcing about a lot of the notions that I went over and didn't go over about what a platform engineering team does, right? So in particular, it's paying attention to the developers, right? So one of the steps in the maturity model is, do you have a product manager, right? Like, are you getting feedback from the developers? And you'll get an idea of what those are there, and be able to plan this out a lot better. So finally, no talk nowadays is complete without talking about AI. So how am I going to fit that in there? That's a great idea. Great question. I'll tell you. So here we are talking about large organizations and private cloud. And I think what's interesting, it's interesting, but what is relevant to platform engineering with AI is a couple of things. One, to the notion of large organizations where, as we saw the CEO of AWS say, a lot of it is private cloud, somewhere between 90 and 60%, depending on which organization you talk with at some of our larger customers, et cetera. You also survey those organizations, and you see that their intention, at least, we'll see how it pans out, is to run a lot of their AI stack on premises, right? Which I guess makes sense, because of data and wanting to control things. I think it's a little early to get too settled on where the workloads will be, but that's the early feedback that you get, that the intentions at the moment are to have a lot of it in a dedicated environment, right? And about 50% of it. Now, what that means is that the platform engineers, the way that I think I and some of my coworkers and other people in the community are seeing, the way they start to think about how to support AI in their platforms. And by this, I don't mean like all the kind of like assistants or co-pilots, like coding in your IDE. That's a whole other sort of thing. But here I mean adding actual AI functionality, actual features to your applications, to how your business is running. So what I think is emerging is that the platform engineers, they get all enamored of AI. They start freaking out if it's going to replace their job, as we all do. And then they actually start using it day to day, and they're like, oh, this is fine. It'll be great. And they start to think about that AI functionality as services that they're providing, as middleware, right? So once you kind of appreciate the magic of what all these AI things do and the mind-blowing awesomeness, and then you come back down to reality, maybe you've had a huge lunch, and so you can think more clearly. What you start to think about is like, oh, I'm just providing another piece of middleware, a service to developers. How does this fit into the workflow that they have, which I know because I've talked with them, because I'm a great platform engineer, product manager type. What can I do when they need to use this and fold it into the way they're doing application development? It's probably similar to when they use a database, or they need to do some sort of messaging thing. And that's where having a platform is going to be a huge advantage, because you'll have so much of that scaffolding, so much of that stuff built in already. You're already providing access to services, And you can start to think about how you add this new type of service, how you add access to all sorts of models, all sorts of supporting frameworks, whether you want to run those models on your own, whether you want to broker access to your own models, to publicly hosted ones, whatever it may be. If you've been doing platform engineering for even a short amount of time, you're used to dealing with that kind of thing with the other services that you have. And it's not like it's not going to be a problem. Every service has its own unique, cool things that you get to experience. But at least you're going to have done a lot of the conceptual work around it. So thanks for coming to my talk. It's always a pleasure to talk with people and go over this. If you're interested in clicking on the links in the slides, there they are. And it's always fun to hear people's experience with platform engineering or other things. It's not like I get super happy to talk about platform engineering. There's other things that are fun as well. But, it's always good to hear from people, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.